All right, welcome to the podcast, Coach Easley.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So my first question to you is, why boxing? Why didn't you choose other sports? What attracted you towards this one more than anything else?
To compete in or to run an organization centered around the sport?
More to organization. Did you compete as well?
I did for many years. When I was a young kid, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and I was involved in a local karate club where we used to get dressed up in an outfit and go to the gym and kick and do all kind of stuff. I was probably did that from like 8 to maybe 10 years old. And then I had a relative who moved up the street from our family, up the block a couple houses, who was a little bit older than me when he was into boxing. And I guess maybe he must have thought I was a little too full of myself or something, but he invited me to go to the boxing gym with him one time, and he told me I could take all the gear with me, whatever I wanted to take, my outfit, all that stuff. So we got a ride from his mom, went downtown Pittsburgh, dropped us off at this building, and I opened the door, and I had to walk up. I think it was on the second floor, but it was like 2.5 flights of steps, and the closer I got to the top, I could hear the sounds. I could hear the beating of the speed bag. I could just hear the thump, thump, thump. I could hear the jump rope hitting the old wood floor. And any sort of self-confidence I had from martial arts, the minute I laid my eyes on the gym, was completely gone. And I was looking around, and I noticed that these guys are all just wearing shorts and no shirt and like zero body fat. And I'm thinking back to the martial arts, and all these kids are chubby and the instructor's out of shape. And I thought, man, I think I'm going to make a change. And I got my opportunity to get in the ring that day, and nothing I knew from karate transitioned at all to boxing. And I thought, well, this karate stuff's a joke. I said, this is real. And that was when I started to compete. I was about 11 years old.
Is there competitive karate, like on a world scale?
I mean, there is karate competition and judo and stuff in the Olympics, but it's the stage for it compared to the stage you have for boxing isn't nearly as available for people to see. It's kind of a little bit hidden. It's not very well attended. It's really hard to monitor the sport and watch the sport.
Okay. Do you think that people are more adhered towards boxing, or do you think they would prefer like other sports? Because I was like, for one thing, I know my parents were strongly against it because I competed for like 2 years well before, and then I had an injury in my stomach. I didn't do anything. My sophomore year here, I gained a whole bunch of weight. I just sat on my computer the whole time. And then I figured out about your class. And then before that, I was just doing relentless push-ups and sit-ups and calisthenics so I can lose the weight. And finally, when I got to your boxing gym, it was surreal, because one of my friends told me that you were running this. So I was just doing a bunch of exercises that you were having him do, like way back when. And I was like, this is what helped me lose the weight more than anything else. Like, I didn't take any diet pills or anything like that just because I'm afraid to take them, quite honestly. I don't know what they would do to my body.
Well, I wouldn't advise that. I mean, what you put in your body is what comes out, so you got to be smart about that. But, boxing definitely has a negative connotation to it, unfortunately. At one time, boxing and baseball were the two biggest sports in the United States, hands down. But now boxing has really gone by the wayside. In a lot of ways, it's due to the perception that people have. Unfortunately, a lot of people see amateur boxing and they translate that to professional boxing. They think that kids are in the gym fighting to the death and, being pushed beyond their limits and made to fight. And the reality is that's nowhere near what it's like. In fact, I've served on the administrative board for the Olympic Boxing Committee for the past 15 years. And one of the things that we study is injury in sports, and injury in amateur sports specifically. Boxing has consistently ranked right around between 65 and 75th on the injury list, meaning that there's 64 to 74 sports above us that sustain more injuries than boxing does. You look at sports where people are colliding with each other like hockey or football on a regular basis, the possibility for concussion stuff that exists, more prevalent than in boxing. What a lot of people don't understand about boxing, and you probably see this firsthand being at the gym, when we're doing training, there could literally be a 25-year-old, 200-pound adult jumping rope next to a 60-pound 8-year-old. Mm-hmm. The skill set doesn't have to mirror each other in order to be able to work out and train for boxing. Right. So to segue from your question as to why boxing, outside of having competed in it for 20 years, it was important for me to be able to recreate the environment that I grew up in Pittsburgh, because I was in touch with a lot of the coaches and stuff there at the gym, so there were things that I could confide in to them that I may not be comfortable telling my parents or friends, brothers, sisters, whatever. So I wanted to be able to offer that space for kids in our community, but I also wanted to provide an athletic endeavor for kids. And if we were doing like basketball or soccer or whatever, the kids would have to have some similar skill set in order for us to do that. Now with boxing, obviously I can have my whole team of 30 plus kids, all different ages, because in boxing you have to be 8 years old all the way up to 35 to compete in amateur. So you could literally have a 35-year-old, 8-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, all different heights, weights, skill set, experience, whatever, all jumping rope at the same time trying to train to get better. And then they can all move to the heavy bag and train together. So their skill set doesn't have to be the same. If we were doing a sport like basketball, it would be nearly impossible.
Right.
So that is another answer as to why boxing, because my experience, the facility, and the nature of the sport, being able to train as a team, yet not necessarily having to have the same set of skills as every individual. But the negative connotation is there because of the perception, I think, the general public feels that
you die in the ring.
A lot of people
to
see
be honest, that's what it really is, yeah.
In professional boxing, you're boxing anywhere from 4 to 12 rounds. Obviously, when you get into those 8, 10, 12-round fights, they're championship caliber fights. So you are putting it on the line. You're willing to push yourself to unknown limits to try and succeed in that event. When you look at amateur boxing, especially on the youth level, it's the only amateur sport that requires the participants to, one, have a complete sports physical diagnosis prior to coming to the event. Mm-hmm. When they're at the event, it's required by our laws to have an MD or a DO give the child or youth member a full physical before the event. Then the physician is required to sit ringside to observe the event. If somebody gets a bloody nose or something, the doctor immediately goes to the ring and assesses whether the bout should be continued or should be stopped. At the conclusion of the bout, the contestants have to come back and report to that doctor again. So in the course of a match that a young kid may participate in, they see a physician 3 times. Before, during, and after the fight. They're also competing for 1 minute round. 1 minute. They fight for 1 minute. They get 1 minute off. They compete for another minute. So the entire competition that they're in the ring lasts for 3 minutes. That's spread over 6 minutes, but 3 minutes is all they're competing. So they have oversized padded gloves. They have a formed mouthpiece. They have oversized padded headgear. They have a cup and groin protector. For females, they have a breast protector. So the odds of them sustaining a concussion are, in my opinion, are so minimal. In all the years that we've run the gym, 30-some years I've been there, we've had a handful, maybe 5 to 10 concussions, maybe that many. So, you're talking, one every couple of years.
Yeah, you've been doing it for a while. It's not very many concussions.
No, 1991 we opened the facility. So, the injuries aren't there. You are more likely to get maybe somebody's thumb gets injured because they didn't close their fist the whole way, or if one of the kids didn't wrap their hands properly that are more advanced and they really can hit hard. Maybe they bruise a knuckle or something. But you don't get like a twisted ankle like you get in track and field. You know, you get that every day. You don't get the torn ACLs like you do in basketball every year. You don't get the concussions like you do in football every year. But nobody hears that. They just hear the word boxing and they want nothing to do with it.
Yeah, they assume complete violence. But I mean, for someone who's not educated in that sport, I can understand why they would say that, because it's not advertised like football or basketball, or like there's no, at any high school that I've been to, there wasn't a high school boxing team, but there is a high school basketball team and a football team and a track team. So I think people are just not exposed to it at the same age as they would be other sports.
Excuse me. Yeah, I believe that's correct. I mean, there's just been such negative connotation on it. And unfortunately, you know, when the NCAA gave up the sport of boxing back in the late 50s, it really created an area of unknown to where the sport would advance to. So the sport has operated independently for so many years that it hasn't had the support of high school, you know, colleges, professional institutions to kind of create like leagues and things of that nature like these other sports have. So the popularity of it has declined a little bit. You don't see it on TV unless you're, you know, paying ultra money, and I think that's just a few people capitalizing on the situation. So there's a lot of negatives that have administratively have been going on in boxing for many years that has led it down that path. But the reality of it is it's one of the safest sports, which is, people find that hard to believe, but statistics don't lie. I mean, you look at the statistics and how many ACL injuries you have in basketball, how many twisted ankles you have in track and field, how many concussions you have in football, and you look at the injuries in boxing where you get, you know, a sore thumb, you know, occasional black eye, a bloody lip.
I'd rather have a sore thumb than a torn ACL any day of the week.
Absolutely. Yeah,
there's no comparison.
True.
Why, with regards to exercise, why do you think people are so against it? Because when I first got to your boxing gym, I actually thought that was better than what I was doing in like a regular just lifting weights gym. Just for whatever reason, when you're using your body as the weight itself, I have noticed that I lose more weight and I get stronger faster. So that's why I pretty much shifted my workout completely towards jumping rope. I do jumping jacks, push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, and that has done more for me than like bench pressing or using free weights. Is there any medical reason for that?
Well, you know, I believe that boxing is probably the ultimate combination of aerobic and anaerobic exercises. So when you're doing things like a bench press or something where you're not doing like an aerobic exercise but like an anaerobic exercise, or if you're the individual that's just running or swimming, just doing the aerobic and no anaerobic, the results can definitely vary. But when you have the best mix of that, which I truly believe that a boxing core workout does, because it has both elements and they're both on the intense level, that your body is just going to create a lot of muscle confusion and it's going to develop quicker and you're going to see results much faster. I think anybody that just decided to wake up and run 3 miles a day for a month, and that was just a straight aerobic exercise compared to somebody that came in and did a full boxing workout, when you have both sides of that, aerobic and anaerobic, for a month, I think the results would be staggering.
That's interesting thought. Because people think about losing weight, your first immediate thought is just running. Mm-hmm. It's not really what we do. Like, it's not crunches, and it's not like a heavy bag. It's nothing like that.
Sure, man. For a long time, people used to think, you know, if you lift weights, they don't want to lift weights because they're going to gain weight and become slow. And
that's what I thought for a long time too.
Well, then I'd have to ask, why would every major institution like Michigan State and the National Football League and National Baseball League invest billions of dollars in weight training facilities? You know, there was a time when individuals thought specificity was the way to go. So in other words, baseball players would pick up like a weighted object, and they would throw it, and then when they picked up the baseball, they thought, well, the baseball seems so light, I'm now able to throw faster than I was before. But the reality of it is that when they threw the weighted object, it altered their mechanics. So they have this crazy thing. It's called science. It came along, and it said, let's analyze the human body and see what muscle is used when somebody goes through a baseball throwing motion. So you have 10% tricep, 15% bicep,
right.
X% this, whatever. And so now what they do is National Baseball League has invested billions of dollars in these weight training facilities and weight trainers and coaches. Now these athletes are on a weight training program, and that's why every pitcher in a major league can throw 100 miles an hour. They're not throwing a lead ball around anymore. They're focusing, when they throw that ball, they're focusing on their mechanics. And if they need to increase their speed, then they're increasing their bench press or their curl or whatever they're working on in the weight room. And the same thing can be said about any other athlete, track and field, football. When you look and say, well, I don't want to lift weights because I'm going to get slow and too big. Well, I would say that, how slow do you feel that the NFL running backs are and the wide receivers? I mean, they're in the weight room doing ridiculous amount of squats and everything. Mm-hmm. So that's not the case. Plus, if you really took that analogy and said, I don't want to lift weights because I'm going to get too big, don't you think every 90-pound weakling would walk into a weight room, pick up a barbell and lift it for 30 seconds and then walk out as Mr. Atlas?
As like a Hulk, yeah.
Not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So,
is there any... Well, we talked about athletes. Is there any reason that just an average person doesn't want to exercise? Like, why is that such a hard task, but playing a video game is just so much easier on you?
I just feel that it's a different world. It's a different world. When I was a kid, you're outside all the time. You didn't have all the internet, the cell phones, and all these things. And the way they've restructured grammar schools and done away with a lot of phys ed programs.
Yeah, no PE in a lot of places.
They got to a point in time where nobody could lose. Everybody would get a participation trophy. Everybody was able to participate. It was no longer the strong will survive. I mean, I remember being on pickup basketball teams in grammar school and wanting the biggest kid, hoping he'd pick me for his team because I didn't want to guard him.
Yeah.
But now you can't be in that situation because somebody could be offended or somebody, may not be happy, and everybody has to win. And I think that's led to a horrible, horrible situation with a lot of young kids. And I don't know how that's going to. I look at my daughter and son, and I wonder what they're going to be like when they get older, if they'll maintain that. Because not only is it physical activity to maintain the body, but to maintain the brain too.
Yeah, I tell people that when you are working out, it's more mental than physical. It's just your ability to push through discomfort because it's good for you. You have to do it. I don't know how someone lives like a balanced lifestyle without working out. It doesn't make sense.
I don't either because I've been in a gym almost every day of my life for 50 years. So it's really hard for me to fathom how other people can do it without even so much as walking to the store. I mean, I ride my bike because I don't want to deal with parking even on campus. I'll ride my bike, and I know other faculty and some even students are just baffled. How could you ride your bike here? I mean, they get dropped off in front of the building, and they live like half a mile away. I mean, to me, it's crazy. I would just walk or whatever, ride a bike.
Yeah, MSU is a pretty big campus too, and I'm like, it's very bike friendly. Like, we have bike lanes in the roads, and I just choose to walk everywhere for that same reason. I really hate finding parking spots, and it's just I think the amount of time I spent walking to a class, that's the same amount of time I would be just finding a place to park and saving the time I would driving. So,
yeah, I would agree with that. In fact, I did a little study on myself a couple of years ago because I got into a disagreement with one of the faculty members at Lansing Community College. So I've been teaching at both institutions for 18 years, and I've always, for every fall semester, I had a class that ended at MSU, and I had about 30 minutes. And I used to drive and then drive to LCC, and then I decided I was going to try and bike the river trail. I was curious how long it was going to take me. And it took me a little bit longer than I thought to bike there. But when I actually timed walking to my vehicle, then parking my vehicle and walking to the classroom, I was able to bike there, and it took me, I think it was 2.5 minutes longer to bike. So in essence,
That's nothing.
It took me basically the exact same time.
Exactly.
And that was when I was going on the river trail. Now, when I followed the street, which I don't necessarily care to do sometimes because there's that particular route, there's not real bike friendly in the Frand or Lansing area. Mm-hmm. So when I did it that way, though, I could be there quicker when I rode my bike. I actually could be there about 5 minutes faster than it took me to drive. So with those things, it makes you wonder why somebody wouldn't put in a little effort into their life.
But there has to be some sort of, because you think people know that it's good for you, right? Like they know that physical exercise, even just walking, like on a daily basis, they probably know it's good for your body.
Well, I think it's common knowledge that it's good, but it's also common knowledge that you shouldn't drink too much soda and you shouldn't drink all these crazy drinks. You shouldn't eat McDonald's, but yet people just binge on that stuff and they just destroy their bodies. When I was coming up as an athlete, I never ever ate fast food. To this day, there's a number of restaurants that I've never even eaten at. That people, when I get into the conversation, they find it hard to believe that I've never eaten like at a Taco Bell.
I've never had Taco Bell either.
And some of these places, I haven't been to a fast food joint. I mean, 30 years maybe. I don't even know when I couldn't even name it. I couldn't even tell you the last time I had a soda or anything like that. Just part of your life. I never get involved in it. And but some people just go the extra mile to use that stuff for whatever reason, comfort or something.
Did you have it as a kid?
No, not really. My family was never one to really have a lot of those things around. I remember the sweetest thing that we ever drank, really, my mother used to make iced tea, and she would keep it in a large pitcher. And when she made it, which seemed like once every 6 months, it was like such a treat to have. And every blue moon, maybe she'd make a thing of Kool-Aid for the kids. But we basically just drank water. I mean, that was really it.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough that my parents never bought pop. So I was never introduced to it as a kid. And they never bought, the only time I could have candy was on Halloween. The only time that I could have pop was at, someone's birthday party. And the only time I could have pizza was the same thing. It was, at a birthday party or some sort of event that called for a food like that. We never, just on a casual basis, were hey, let's go get, a 2-liter Mountain Dew or something like that. It was just never in my house. So I never developed a taste for it.
Sure, good for you.
I was just lucky enough that my parents felt that way about food. And the sweetest drink that we had was probably orange juice, apple juice, stuff like that. And I didn't realize how much sugar was in them, for one thing, back at that time. That was before we knew how to read a nutrition label. Mm. But I think that was just their alternative towards pop. Because as a kid, I was never why can't I drink it? Because the carbonation just never fit with me in the first place. But I was curious as to why everyone was so in love with it. I'm I think it tastes fine. I just prefer water, because I didn't know about this back then, but it really dehydrates you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, geez. I've had, even after working out, in the water bottles, they'll put, pop. They'll just go to the caf, fill it with pop in the water bottle and just drink it. I'm you are insane. Because if I did that, I would just collapse.
Yeah, it wouldn't be good. I mean, I've drank soda before, and I always thought it had a funny aftertaste. I think it's the sweeteners or something in it. But, yeah, I mean, that's probably the last thing you want to put in your body, especially after a workout.
Yeah, I can just only imagine, because people drink it on a daily basis.
Well, I think that's the biggest issue with obesity in the United States, especially childhood obesity, is the liquid calories that people drink.
I agree.
You can look at somebody that say, well, I'm just going to have a hamburger, but then they drink 5 Cokes. There's 1,000 calories in those 5 Cokes and 150 in the burger. So the drinking of the liquid calories is a huge, huge issue.
But people know that.
People do know that, but some of them don't believe it. Some of them refuse to.
How do you not believe it?
Well, they probably believe it, but they just don't accept it. They just don't accept it. I have a gentleman that comes to the gym. He's severely overweight, and he went to a weight loss clinic about a year ago, I guess, in Saginaw somewhere. And he came back and told me, after me preaching to him for a year, you got to give up that soda. He'd show up at the gym with a bottle of soda, and of course, my rules, and you can't.
You can't bring that in. Yeah.
But he'd keep it in his car, and he would drink it before and after. And he went to this weight loss clinic, and they put cups in front of him and put sugar in it to show him how much. And I don't know. I guess he had a revelation or something. But everybody knows It's just whether or not they accept it. Everybody knows that it's proper, that you should work out. It's good for your body. It's good for your health. It's good for your longevity. But does anybody want to make time to do it? That's the problem. You got to make the time and weigh your priorities. What's more important, working out a little bit or sitting and watching some TV show?
Yeah, what I tell people is I don't think it's about making time. I think you have the time. I think it's about priorities. Because if I told you that if you did 100 push-ups every other day for a year, and at the end of that year, I will give you $1 million, you will find a way to get those push-ups done.
Oh, of course,
but
yeah.
If I told you that if you do that, and at the end of the year, you become a much healthier human being, now you're like, is it worth it? Which I was like, what do you mean?
Yeah, well, I agree with the fact that everybody has time. You don't necessarily have to make time. You just have to adjust your time schedule. Mm-hmm. I have a son that's in Afghanistan in the military, and my wife and I just recently had another child who's almost 3 years old. And before she was born, I would love to sit on our deck with a pot of coffee and maybe have a cigar on a Saturday afternoon or whatever, and read the paper. But now we have a daughter that's young. I don't do that anymore. So I don't do that. I spend time with her. So you have the time. It's just how you categorize and
you allocate
your
it.
time. That's all. So people have the time to work out, but they choose to do other things.
Have you heard of the fat acceptance thing that feminists are trying to push? Heard of that at all?
No, it's the first time I've ever heard of it.
So what people are, I say people, I'm hoping to God, this is the minority of it. But what the notion is that regardless of your body weight or your body shape, you are considered to be healthy if you're happy.
No, I've never heard that.
No, because it's bullshit. Yeah. But they're on news, they're on CNN, NBC. These are national news headlines it's called fat acceptance. And these are people who are over 300 pounds. They are morbidly obese. And they're saying, well, it's this is just my body shape. This is just who I am. And I'm happy with it. And people are like, no. Happy is subjective, right? I'm not here to tell anyone if you're happy or not. That's completely up to you. But I don't think healthy is that,
Well, I would disagree with that. I know at one time back in the medieval ages that being overweight was considered attractive and wealthy because there was lack of food for
yeah.
the rest of the world. But
now?
Yeah, now if somebody comes in and they're extremely overweight but they're happy, they're healthy, I think we should run a diabetes test on them and a high blood pressure test and cholesterol test and let science determine if they're healthy or not their emotions. I
had an issue with that with... not my sister, but one of my sister's friend's siblings who goes here, Michigan State, and she was because I lost 65 pounds over the course of 1.5 years, wow. And this was before I got to your gym, and then it was that she asked me how to do the same thing, and she was going over her daily routine. And it's what workouts do I do, and I'm like, you can just do it at home. For me, it was majority push-ups. That's what really did it for me. But her thing was that, well, I should be... Because she's the one who brought it up to me in the first place. I hadn't heard about it until she told me. And it's the fat acceptance is that you should not belittle someone, which I agree with that. Just because you have a certain weight, that doesn't give anyone the right to make fun of you. That's fine. But to call yourself healthy, that's not a positive message that you should be spreading to people because they're going to schools and saying this stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm my sister who's in high school, she's intelligent enough to ask my mom or me. She's because she said, why is this a thing? I'm I don't know. But these, I said, I don't have the right to tell you if you're happy. But it doesn't make sense. Why would you call that a healthy lifestyle? Because it's not. Do what you said. It's run a diabetes test and blood pressure. You'll find very quickly that you're not a healthy individual. Yeah, I would agree with that. That's the first time ever hearing it. I think it sounds totally absurd, though. I think it's crazy. I would agree. It's crazy. But this is a large movement. The audience are actually building up to this. And this is a world we live in, and by me not agreeing with it, I'm sure somebody's offended by that. That's the way
It is these days. You can't hardly
have an opinion
without somebody. No, you can say your opinion on anything, and somebody will twist it somehow, some way. I mean, even how over the last 18 years of teaching here, how things have changed is I have students now videotape me in lecture halls. Videotape you and just want you to. It's almost like their mission is not in that class to learn. Their mission is come to that class to see if they can catch you in a discriminating way that they can then posterize and become a hero for exploiting you.
What do they video? Like, do they watch your lectures and they go home?
Yeah, I mean, they'll just videotape you in the classroom. I had a colleague not too long ago, about a year ago, that got reprimanded for using the word kosher in a lecture.
What?
It was talking and just was going over the details of an assignment and made some off the remark about, okay, is everybody kosher or whatever, or something along those lines. Somebody had on videotape, somebody was offended, somebody reported him. Next thing you know, he's going through the process of being reprimanded for that. I mean, that's just how it is. College is the home of free speech, and I get all that, but to try and like actively look for a way to twist somebody's words, and that really seems to be, I see it a lot more and more these days than I ever have, especially with the way the kids videotape you in the classroom nowadays, which is astonishing.
Wow. Okay, I did not know about that.
Yeah, that's rampant. I've had more than one colleague express to me, and then they want you to approach them and ask you to turn that phone up or pay attention, and you can't do that. You can't interact like that.
You can't ask them to turn their phone off when you're giving the lecture?
I mean, you could, but it could very easily get twisted.
But if
those are the types of eggshells that the professors walk on these days, that the student body doesn't even realize.
But if someone's offended, then be offended. Like, why should I have to change my opinion because your feelings?
There's a platform in place nowadays that if anybody is offended by they're offended by my tie or whatever.
Your tie?
Whatever they're offended by.
Okay.
There's an avenue for them to take that complaint to the maximum level. That's what we've created for people. And in some situations, it's rightfully so. If some people are actively being offensive in a certain regard, then yes, you should not be able to just brush that off. You should have a pathway to get that out there. But that pathway to get the cases that should be out there exist for the individuals that are offended by someone saying the word kosher. And it's just really...
Yeah, that makes no sense.
It makes no sense, but it's just a hypersensitive situation. Every once in a while I'll get a really oddball complaint against myself, and I just think this is crazy. It was never like this 10, 15 years ago.
I think what you said earlier is probably right. I think people are just looking for a reason.
I believe that exists. I think people's mission, they want to be a hero. They want to be the one that caught this on film. They want to be the one to exploit this. They want to be behind the movement that got this person fired. I mean...
For what personal gain?
I have no idea.
What?
It exists. Trust me, it exists.
It's not as if, like, you will sleep better at night knowing that you got this guy out of a job. Like...
No, but it's
what?
set up now that it can destroy somebody's career, it can destroy somebody's family, it can destroy their life. I mean, it's that set up. That's why all of us now in the educational field are hypersensitive and overly critical.
Rightfully so.
Well, I mean, we just can't hardly say anything anymore. You really got to stick to a script. It's really hard to be yourself. In fact, I was talking to my wife not too long ago, and I said, with all this that went on last year with this gentleman being reprimanded with the word kosher, I feel like I am far less of a teacher than I was 10 years ago. I was more myself. I was better at interacting with students. I got to know them better. I could talk to them on a more personal level. I interacted with them more of who I am. And I feel in the last, 5 years, I've just become like a blank slate where I can't be too demanding. I can't open up my guard too much. I can't really say the right certain things. Just overly cautious of how you interact with students, because there'll be that one student that's offended, and that one student could take down your career and your family and your life after 20 years of service. that's how it's set up these days, and it's very disappointing to see that.
Why do they trust the student over the teacher who's been teaching for 20 years?
It's not that they trust them, it's just that there's an avenue now for individuals who are offended or whatever to take a complaint. So they can take a complaint, and the office could look at that complaint and say, oh, this is pretty trivial. If the student's not happy with that, there's a path for them to go higher, and then higher, and higher, until it's on, it's in everybody's face, and then it has to be dealt with. Then you force the school to deal with it.
I see.
And sometimes it's dealt with by just like a conversation between the student and the professor, or sometimes it's dealt with the issuing of an apology. I mean, it's just all kind of, sometimes it's very minor. But the fact that it exists really limits and ties the hands of a lot of people in the educational field, because you just can't be yourself. Teaching is not what it was 20 years ago, when you would just come in and you could just talk off the seat of your pants and tell stories and share information and just really relate to people. Now it's more like you're reading a script. This is what we need to cover. This is what you need to learn. I'm a robot. I can't say anything slightly funny or sarcastic or anything, because
people get offended.
People are going to be offended. It's just the things that we have to tolerate now are crazy. But that's the way it is in this world, this day and age.
Well, thank you for coming out for the podcast, man. I appreciate that.
No problem. Not at all. I admire you for doing what you're doing, and don't mean it on such a sour note. So if you got any listeners out there that are interested in the boxing, you make sure you share the information for the Crown Boxing Club with them. Get involved with the Michigan State University kinesiology program. Got lots of classes that might interest them, and an avenue to get a spot on the men's or women's collegiate boxing team. Please
work out. Moral of the story. Do you want to give a shout out to your radio show?
Oh yeah. Anybody from WKAR that tunes in? How you doing? Good to see you. Al, I'll be talking to you soon, buddy.
All right. That's it. Stay fresh, stay golden.